Welcome to Something Rhymes with Purple. As if you couldn't tell, this is one of our live shows, and we're thrilled to be back at the Fortune Theatre in London, in Covent Garden, one of the most beautiful, intimate theatres in the land. It's where Woman in Black is showing on weeknights, but on a Sunday afternoon, we have a 2:00 matinee. We've got a residency here up until February. I just live for the future. I was torn between April Fool's Day and Valentine's Day, and always for me, Valentine's Day seems like April Fool's Day. That's why I got confused. Anyway, this is where we come once a month and meet Purple people and people who are new to Purple and have a fun time. And we do a different topic every time we do one of these live shows, and we have questions and answers instead of our correspondence. So that's the nature of the beast.
And we have lovely people who come every time. So thank you so much to those of you who come again.
This is the voice of Susie Dent.
Oh, yes.
A leading lexicographer, and she's been my friend since we first met on the wonderful word game Countdown, and we've been friends ever since. And we just meet up once a week to create a podcast all about words and language. And Susie usually chooses the theme. And what's the theme you've chosen for our conversation today?
I have chosen a topic that is very close to your heart. I know it's one of your passions, cooking. And you know a lot about this, don't you, Gyles?
People who are here in the audience can see I'm doing a sort of faking a yawn. I'm not a good cook. And I'm less interested in food as the years go by.
But you tweet regularly about what you're about to eat.
Because I'm amused by the look of it.
OK.
If it's an amazing plate of something, I do that terrible thing. I photograph it and send it out on Instagram or Twitter. My signature dish is a fish finger sandwich, which I love. I'm very keen on baked beans on toast, though I've recently discovered the toast may not be necessary because I'm on a low-carb diet. So I just have the baked beans. And I put them out of the tin in the microwave. But who needs them hot? So I like baked beans that are cold.
Ooh.
And I've now discovered,
No, I couldn't do that.
Open the tin, and now there's a little ring pull. Open the tin, ring pull, and then use the fork and eat them straight from the tin. That's my idea of cooking.
Right. OK, well, we're going to get on really well today.
No, but I'm fascinated by the world of cooking. I'm amazed by the way cookery has become almost a sort of cult thing. There are cooking
Well, I'm hoping
programs.
you've met many a proper chef in your time.
There will be name dropping during the course of this show, because both my wife and I, when we were very lucky, in 1969, we were students together at Oxford University, and we were befriended by the most famous cook in the land in those days, a lovely lady called Fanny Craddock.
Was she?
Anybody else still
I
heard of
remember
Fanny
Craddock. Was she at university with you?
No, she was not. She was even older than us. We were 19 or 20. She was then, I suppose, in her 50s or even 60s.
OK.
And if you don't know Fanny Craddock, difficult to describe. She was a television chef. She was robust.
Very blunt.
I really describe her as a curious cross between Mary Berry and Jeremy Clarkson. She was a great popularizer of good food. She and her husband, Johnny, he was an expert on wine. They did a column in the Daily Telegraph for many years under the name Bon Viveur, and then she began appearing on television. Famously, Johnny is the person who at the end of one programme said, "And I do hope your your donuts turn out like Fanny's." He wore a monocle. I'll tell you more stories about them later. They were a lovely couple, and in some ways they've had a bit of a bad press, but they popularised good cooking.
She was quite sharp-tongued, wasn't she?
She was, but it was done to be amusing.
OK.
Anyway, so we knew Fanny Craddock, but we knew Keith Floyd, we know Raymond Blanc, but I don't know much about the language of cooking. So
OK.
Actually, shall we start? I mean, with the word cook
Yes.
and cooking. What's the origin of those words?
OK, well, it comes from an Old English word, cook, which was the early form of cook, essentially. And
Forgive me, cook is the earlier form of cook. I'm not surprised.
well, it's spelt C-O-C, and that goes back...
As in cook.
Cook. That goes back to the Latin cocus, which also gives concoct. Because you think about concocting something, you're kind of cooking it together.
And cook and cooking, so how do nouns also become verbs? Because you are a cook who cooks. Where did that come along, V?
Well, usually quite soon after one or the other appears. But we tend to think of verbing, changing our nouns into verbs, as being quite modern and quite American.
Or like meddling, I loathe that. I don't know what...
Meddling at an Olympics.
At Olympics. Oh,
yes.
Look who's meddling.
Yes, we've talked about verbing before, haven't we? Solutioning was the one that I couldn't stand. Let's solution a problem. But more often than not, and you'll be familiar with this refrain from me, if you look it up in the dictionary as a verb that we lay at the feet of supersizing America, we had it in British English centuries ago. And Shakespeare loved to verb. I mean, he played around with parts of speech all the time. So it's just one of the major processes of evolution, really, so that we change part of speech and so it moves on in that way.
So cook originally comes from the Latin and cooking comes from cook.
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 Okay, let's talk about different kinds of cooking when we are cooking. I mean, I like a roast. I'm now a veggie.
Me too, but all the trimmings, I'm very happy with that.
I love the trimmings.
Yes. I get very sad, actually, if I ever go out if I'm ever invited to Sunday lunch or if I'm ever at a meal where a roast is served, because I'm veggie, obviously I don't get it. Where actually all I want to say is, I don't care, just give me everything but the meat. Is the same with you?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
We go to a pub near us. We live in southwest London in Barnes. We go to a pub called the Red Lion, where on Sundays they always do a roast.
Yeah.
And because we're veggies, we still have it all. And we have an enormous Yorkshire pudding, lashings of gravy and cabbage.
Do you just check it's not done with goose fat or whatever? I thought that might be the answer. Yeah. OK. Well, should we talk about roasting then?
Actually, a goose fat potato. I'm not saying. People who are here can actually see me salivating. Awful.
OK, so roasting is Germanic because, as we say so often on Purple, English at heart is a Germanic language, despite everything that came from French via Latin, from Greek, and there's a huge percentage of that too. But at its heart, thanks to the Angles and the Saxons, it is a Germanic language.
I don't think I've really absorbed that. I mean, I always thought it was, as it were, Latin and Greek.
Yep.
And then a bit of
French. I mean, there's a bit of
French
everything.
And Anglo-Saxon, but you're saying, is the Anglo-Saxon bit the German?
At its heart, it's Germanic. So Old English was very much based on Germanic vocabulary.
And that means words coming from Germany or...?
Well, Germanic, no, because Germanic nations obviously had very different boundaries originally. So the Angles obviously gave us our name, England, Angleland. And the Saxons gave us Sussex, South Sussex. Wessex was West Sussex, and that's what those were named after. The Saxons, who, if you remember, were named after their weapon of choice, which was a sword, the sax.
This is the joy of this programme. You live and learn. Then, unfortunately, you die and forget it all. But in the interim, do enjoy something rhymes with purple. So roast is a Germanic word. Yes.
Now, would you think that there was a link between roasting something and a roster of duties?
Not necessarily. No. What is the link?
No, there is a link. Because essentially, both go back to a Dutch word from that Germanic family, rooster, which is spelt like our rooster, as in the bird, but it meant a list. But first of all, it meant a gridiron because of the appearance of that list. It looked like a series of kind of grills. So it looks back to one of the earliest meanings of roasting, which was essentially grilling something. And it was used as opposed to baking, which was cooked in an oven. A roast was cooked on an open fire.
So the roster that you see, telling you what hour you're going to turn up at work, that sort of thing, is based on the idea of the grill, the lines across a grill.
Yeah.
How amazing.
I know.
So roast and roster. And indeed, are they not an anagram of each other? Roast and roster? Yes, they are an anagram.
No, because it's roster ER.
What?
ER. Roster is ROSTER.
Oh.
He hasn't done
reality is somewhat deflating at times, isn't it?
Sorry.
What a shame.
I'm sorry.
Yes. So roster is spelled how? R-O-S-T-E-R.
Yes.
And roast is spelled R-O-A-S-T.
Yes.
OK. You mentioned grill. Where does that come from? As in a grill?
Griller, French. This is a French word. So it originally probably goes back to the Romans, but it came to us from French. We give someone a grilling because it's like exposing them to intense heat, by our interrogation. So a lot of cooking metaphors. I'm sure we'll cover lots of them.
Hold on. So the grill, when you're grilling something, the origin, what came first was the grill through which you looked. If you are an enclosed order of nuns peering through grills at the outside world, the passing monks, it's the grill that gives you.
I actually don't know what came first. It's a very good point. I don't know whether that physical grill, as in a railing, came before the grill with which you cook food. I suspect that they probably emerged around the same time, but I can check it because I have the OED. So
Should we check that? Because it'd be useful to know that when you're making small talk.
Well, as we do.
I don't know if you ever watch a programme called First Dates. I never find them having an interesting conversation like we have. Whereas I think if I was on a first date with Susie, I would say, should we have the grill? Oh, tell me more. Which came... And then, we'd see that we were on the same wavelength.
Love it. Anyway, grill, it seems... I wonder if that's spelled with an E. I should know this. The grill with which you look through...
Oh, I'm looking through a grill.
That's, yeah.
Some people in the audience seem to think it is G-R-I-L-L-E.
Yes, exactly. So it's spelled with an E, or you can spell it, so it gives us both. And the cooking sense came first.
There you are. So you cooked with a grill before you looked through a grill. Now we know. But this is very good.
Yeah.
Can I say, if I were meeting you for the first time, I would say that you are beautiful, exquisite, lovely, gorgeous, divine.
And then you'd say you swallowed a thesaurus.
And you got to the punchline before I did. Oh,
I'm sorry.
dearie me.
I'm sorry.
We know each other too well.
We do. Have you ever spatchcocked anything?
She cuts to the chase, doesn't she? Dearie me, our opening word was, cook comes from cock. Let's go on from there. We're now getting to the spatchcock. Tell me about a spatchcock.
OK, well, it's a slightly strange thing, isn't it? So you and I don't eat meat, so we probably don't see this very often, but it's when you split open a whole chicken or a turkey and then grill it. So it makes it easier to grill because I think this is right. It has a flat surface. And so you might say spatchcock that chicken to your, resident chef. But essentially, it comes from a sort of slightly strange phrase from Ireland, actually, dispatch the cock, essentially. And that's when they needed to whip up a very simple dinner. They'd say, let's dispatch that cock.
Marvellous. Now,
I don't know if it actually meant killing the poor animal in the process, but that is essentially what they were doing.
Well, unless you were to eat the animal live, it must have meant that.
As in that sense of dispatch. Anyway, and that was then shortened to spatchcock. And there's also spitchcock, apparently, which is to split an eel lengthways and fry it.
It was Victoria Wood, wasn't it, who defined coq au vin as love in a lorry.
Oh, yeah. What about poaching an egg? I imagine you're quite good at that, are you?
I have to say, a poached egg is, for me, a well-poached egg is perhaps the best thing in the world.
I know, I've still not mastered it.
It's very difficult to do. The real chefs, they just boil up some water and they poach the egg somehow without any appliance. My father used to have a special kind of poaching machine, which we inherited, but it never seemed to work for us. The albumen, that's the white bit, always got stuck inside, even if you put a little bit of butter. And we got a plastic thing recently where you put the egg inside the plastic and it bobbles about.
Yeah.
Have you got a good secret?
No, I just don't. Does anybody here have a good secret?
Of how to poach an egg?
Or maybe you could...
Something to do with the vinegar. I think if you put the right amount of vinegar in the water... then...
If you have got a fantastic way of cooking, please do come up to us in the break.
I love a poached egg.
You mentioned albumen. That's quite nice because that is linked to Albion, which was an old term for Britain, and it was all to do with the Latin albus, meaning white. So Britain was called Albion because of the white cliffs of Dover. And the albumen of an egg is an egg white. It's also linked to album because originally an album in Roman times was this blank bit of white marble upon which public announcements were inscribed.
What is amazing is there's nobody feeding this to her in the ear. She knows this. And she doesn't know what we're going to talk about. She is you are extraordinary.
Well, thank you.
So
poaching. Poaching.
Is it to do with a pocket? Poche?
It is, absolutely right.
Poche is French for pocket.
Yes, and that poche is also behind the poke of don't buy a pig in a poke. In other words, don't buy a pig in a sack at a fair that you can't actually see. So poke was another word for a posh or pocket. Yeah.
Everybody's favourite meal is breakfast, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is your favourite breakfast?
I quite like a good veggie fry-up, I have to say, but I also love porridge.
Really?
Yeah, porridge is what I have every day. Do you not like porridge?
No.
Oh.
I love the TV series, but I don't...
Yes.
No, I think
a
a poached egg actually. Poached egg on brown toast.
That's what you have.
No, it's not what I have, it's what I dream about.
What do you have?
What we're having at the moment, what we had for breakfast this morning, Michelle and I, she had a pear, I had an apple. And I cut it into little squares because I'm trying to contain my weight. And I had some cheese to have the protein.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
What about sautéing? Sautéed things? Sautéed mushrooms?
Yes. Sauté is to jump in French, isn't it?
Exactly right. That's what it is. It makes things jump in the pan, and also often you shake the pan so that the ingredients jump up and down. So it's all about jumping.
Sautéing.
Yep.
Poaching. Oh, stewing.
Stewing. Now, stew is really interesting because the very first meaning of stew was to sit in a hot steam bath, and it was normally a public bath where people would come, much if you imagine a Roman bath, where people would come, strip off, wash, perform their ablutions and just chat to other people. And it was so hot that obviously at some point there was this slightly jokey idea that a set of meat, or some meat and fish in some hot water and some vegetables would look like people sitting in a steam bath. So that's where it came from. And it's from the Latin stufare, which meant to steam. And that also, believe it or not, gave us typhoid because of the incredibly hot temperatures that typhoid patients had, because stufare came from the Greek tuphos, T-U-P-H-O-S, so it's all connected. Typhoid, steam baths and vegetable stews. Isn't it weird? There's actually, at these steam baths, were also public loos, and some people say that in Roman loos, which were next to the steam baths, they used sticks with loo roll, or whatever the equivalent was, at the end of them. And the expression used, get the wrong end of the stick, was when you accidentally, picked up the wrong end. So that's one theory.
You didn't know what you were going to get this afternoon, did you? Instantly, they paid their money, they came in for a thought they'd have a nice, cosy afternoon with that lovely girl, Susie, from Countdown, and they're being exposed to all this sort of thing.
It's horrible.
Did you know, in 1947, among the many wonderful things that happened that year, including, I think, degrees being awarded to women from Cambridge University for the first time.
Oh, amazing.
Only that recent, isn't that extraordinary? But the first soft toilet paper was introduced to Britain.
Really?
Harrods in
the first
1940.
bump. Remember bump, short for bum fodder, which was loo roll. Do you remember?
Is that the origin of bump?
Yeah, something throwaway.
Well, let's get back to cooking.
Okay.
How interesting.
But also, you just reminded me about the wooden spoon. I thought you could just bring in the wooden spoon because I can't quite remember the full story of this, but students, particularly at Cambridge, but also Oxford, I think, those who got the lower degree were given a wooden spoon instead of a certificate.
Oh, that's humiliating.
I know, that's why you
Why
get
would
the
they
wooden
get?
spoon.
What is the symbolism of the wooden spoon?
I'm not completely sure, so I'll come back to that in a future ep.
That is quite interesting.
But yeah, that's where we get the wooden spoon from.
Oh, blanching. Not that I know about
Yes.
blanching, but I do remember Fanny Craddock. In fact, I think there were vessels called blanche bowls.
Oh, really? I've only ever had blanched almonds, I think. That's my only
Blanche, I
experience.
assume, is to do with being white.
It is, blanchir. When we blanch, if we've had a shock, we go white. So I assume with almonds, I can get that. If you blanch them, they go particularly white. So maybe when food is cooked very, very quickly at high heat, just to the, is it just to the boiling point, possibly? I think that's when things go white.
So that's the idea. You scald it at boiling point and for a sort of moment, and then it sort of put it in cold water. That's what blanching. Oh, hence the bowl. That's what the blanching bowl is for.
And then you put it in cold water, don't you? So you really heat it and then you put it in cold water.
Have we talked about frying? Frying tonight?
Frying tonight, no. We don't know where fry comes from.
We don't know.
It's just got lots of, quite similar words in different languages, which suggests it comes from that Indo-European ancient language that we have had to reconstruct.
Explain what you just said. Indo-European.
So Proto-Indo-European is essentially the sort of mother language of all the Indo-European languages. And we don't have any extant records of it, but take something like this to fry. If there are similar words in its descendants, you can then try and reconstruct what the original was. So Proto-Indo-European is entirely reconstructed. We've guessed at that original word, that ua word, because of all the similar things in the family tree.
And what is to fry? To fry is to cook in fat?
To fry is to cook in fat, usually in a frying pan, obviously. And we now have air fryers, don't we, which are the big thing at the moment.
No.
People talking about.
I've heard
Aren't they all talking about air
Airbnb.
fryers?
What's an air fry?
I think you can cook pretty much anything in an air fryer, but now that fuel is so expensive, it's actually really. I mean, I haven't got one, but it's a really economical way of cooking, I think.
Look, before we have our break,
Yes.
we've got a couple more words to do, all about cookery.
Yeah.
We've done cooking, roast, grilling, fried, didn't know much about that. Sautéing, jumping about, poaching, I like that one. Stewing, yes. Blanche, basting, that's a good one.
Basting is a really odd one because it's related to lambast somebody. And if you lambast somebody, you are essentially giving them a grilling or a basting, aren't you? You're kind of scolding them in some way. So you can see how all these culinary metaphors kind of gather force. And the earliest sense of lambast was not, though, to expose them to heat. It was to beat or thrash them. And it seems to come from that idea of basting meaning to thrash. And I suppose the idea of basting something is then... I mean, I can't quite get the sense of the progression. It's a bit of an etymological mystery why when you baste something, when you essentially sort of... Am I right with basting? It's kind of marinating, isn't it, if you're basting something?
No, I thought basting, you take the turkey and you have a brush, like a shaving brush, and you dip it into something and you... Isn't that basting?
Yeah, so that's what I mean by marinating, because for me, marinating is kind of brushing it.
Yes, you're applying a sauce
so it's
or
not the
a
sort
flavouring.
of leaving something, but it's the applying of something.
But when you lambast somebody, I suppose, what does lamb mean?
The lamb is an old dialect word meaning to beat. So it's quite strange that we can have beating and thrashing and then doing whatever we're doing when we're basting meat. Anyway, a bit of a mystery. It's an odd one. Flambé goes back to the French for singed, which makes sense.
I wanted to ask, we were talking all about cookery, the world of cookery, the phrase cooking the books. Has that got a culinary connection?
It's just quite a simple metaphor if you unpick it, because it really means that the ingredients of the books are modified, altered in some way to the benefit of the cook. So when you cook the books, you are altering them in a way that benefits you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Lots of people had ideas about how to poach an egg.
Oh, yes.
Principally, somebody said, really, all you need is a truly fresh egg. Really fresh. I mean, literally laid that day, crack it open into the pan, and it works.
Yeah.
You don't do anything more.
James from Crawley says that the water should be just below boiling, and then you put in a splash of vinegar. Swirl it about, crack your egg into a small mug, pour the egg in below the waterline. How do you do that below the waterline? Do you have to just press it in?
Open it and then you lower it in. You burn your fingers by cracking it underneath it.
And then wait 3-ish minutes. Can I also give a shout out to Anson? And can we get the microphone to Anson? Where are you? Because Anson is going to tell us about the wooden spoon because he teaches at Cambridge. If it's possible to get the house lights up and then the microphone to Anson.
Hello.
Oh, brilliant. There you are.
Yes, so the original Maths Tripos, which is the maths course at Cambridge University, ranked all the students from number 1 all the way down to the bottom. The top student was called a senior wrangler. The first class students were called the wranglers. Then you had the second class students who were called the senior optimates. And then you had the junior optimates. And then after that, you had people who didn't receive honours. Now, the bottom person who received honours and just received honours was called the wooden spoon. And the wooden spoon was a ceremonial spoon of about 5 feet. And they used to lower it upon graduation. So when your name was read out, you received your spoon.
Can you imagine what a humiliating ritual?
Well, but how fantastic, a 5-foot-long wooden spoon.
No, I have seen a picture of that, actually.
But it's fantastic.
It is huge.
And were people humiliated or rather sort of proud in an absurd way?
I think it depends on the particular person. I suspect some of them were quite proud to just have passed with probably the minimum amount of work. It's quite nice to be able to pass and only just pass with the minimum amount of work.
This is Cambridge University, is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Cambridge.
Yes, no wonder it's being closed down.
Thank you, Anson.
I'm joking, but I don't think you'd get away with that wooden spoon thing now, would you?
No, but thank you so much. Moving on to a question to the audience. Basically, thank you so much to everybody who came to offer their advice and their education. But this is Fran from Chalfont St Peter. Fran, you have a question for us, I think.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
We were talking about Nosy Parker before the performance, and we wondered which Parker that is. Who does it refer to? Can you answer that?
Nosy Parker.
Yes.
The interesting bit is that it was a person called Nosy, who got it the wrong way round, who found it very difficult to find a place to park his car. He was known as the Nosy Parker. Tell your story
this.
about getting here today.
Well, it's not very interesting. It was just very annoying. So I explained I had to drive because it was a bus replacement service today. And I was circling. It was just the stupidest thing ever to drive to London. I was circling, going round and round and round and round. Must have been circling for about half an hour, could not find anywhere to park. And then I saw a car was just about to move. And 4 quite elderly people were making their way into the car. And eventually they saw me waiting there and they said, "Oh, did you want to park in?" I said, "Yes, thank you." And I was being quite patient, but I had 3 cabs behind me who were not so patient. Beep, beep, beep. But I thought, I'm going to stick this out. I have a show to do. So we sat there for 10 minutes. Big backlog behind me. The car finally moves out. They were on a double yellow line. So I had to then move on. I was so frustrated.
What is the origin of the expression Nosy
dear.
Parker?
Okay, well, lots and lots of stories as to who the original Nosy Parker was, Fran. But the Oxford Dictionary, I just checked this to see, either a fictitious individual whose story has become lost. But I know the Countdown Dictionary, which is the current dictionary, says that it probably was a voyeuristic park keeper. So the parker, the idea of somebody who is a park keeper and likes to sort of, snoop on amorous couples. That's what they think. So, I'm so sorry about this, but you can take your pick.
Well, I don't like that definition.
No.
But there we are.
No,
You're
I agree.
very
But
fast.
1890, so fairly recent.
Gosh,
really.
1890.
Yeah.
There have been Nosy Parkers since then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the next question comes from?
Okay, so the next question.
Give us your name, where you come from, etc.
I'm Stephen from Hampton Court, South West London.
Stephen from Hampton Court.
The
I
Hampton
told
Court
you it was
area.
that kind of audience.
So while washing my daughter's hair, we had a good laugh about the word shampoo and how it's just got that semi-rude word just tacked onto the end of it. And we wonder I wonder where that poo comes from, etymologically speaking, and if it's found anywhere else in any other words.
In the 1950s, there was a wonderful joke shop at the top of the Tottenham Court Road, and I used to go there regularly to spend my pocket money. And I remember buying shampoo there. And it was plastic dog poo that you would take home.
Shampoo.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd leave, and it so infuriated my mother, because it fooled her, it always fooled her, if we didn't have a dog. But I left. Extraordinary. So, but that's the little joke you're having with your daughter, because people like
Anything
a
with
naughty
poo
word,
in.
don't they? Is that
Yes,
right?
they do. Yes. Okay, so originally, if you were to give anyone a shampoo, it would have been someone else probably, and you would have been giving them a massage, because it comes from a Hindi word meaning to massage, which has no relationship with poo whatsoever. It's just that, as we often say on the podcast, if we have a foreign word, we often just mangle it because we can't pronounce it. And so if we have a word that sounds vaguely like it, we will use that instead. But actually in French, I love the way they try and mask the poo bit, because they call it shampoing. Shampooing is shampoing, which is great and sounds much more glamorous, but it comes from a Hindi word meaning to massage. So originally it was using lots of wonderful scented ointments and things, and eventually it settled on the hair wash.
Excellent. Now, the next question is going to come from Christopher, who comes from South London. Christopher, are you upstairs, downstairs?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm here. I was reading again Trollope's Barchester Towers the other week and came across the word sesquipedalian,
Oh, yes.
which I had
Yes,
to
I've often- yeah.
look up,
Yeah.
which means a bit long-winded. But
Yeah,
I wondered
overuse of long
where it
words.
came from.
Yeah.
Sesquipedalian.
Yes, sesquipedalian is one of those words where it kind of almost bears itself out. It's sort of self-referential, because to be sesquipedalian is to overuse long words. And sesquipedalia, I think, is the overuse of long words. And of course, it's ridiculously long. And I think it comes from Latin for words that are 6.5 feet long. I think that's the idea. And the ped bit there is as in pedicure, pedometer, etc. So it's a kind of joke in itself. And you'll often find little jokes hidden in some of our words. So, for example, tandem as well, the bicycle tandem, that comes from the Latin at length. And obviously some schoolboy learning Latin thought that would be quite fun to call this bicycle tandem at length. So quite often you find these little jokes. But I often find words that are like a palindrome is not a palindrome, and someone with a lisp cannot say lisp. I mean, I think there are some sort of quite cruel things in our words sometimes. But anyway, it's a great question. And
Sesquipedalian.
Yes.
And I do commend you for reading Anthony Trollope. Anyone who hasn't tried Anthony Trollope, give it a go. Thank you so much for your questions. If people have got questions of any kind, and we haven't answered them today, you can email us. It's purple@somethingelse.com, and the something is spelled without a G. Every week, Susie also gives us 3 words that she particularly enjoys. They may be archaic words, they may be current words, but they're not ones usually that we're familiar with, but you want us to be. What have you got for us this week?
Yes. So how this works is I will choose a real word that definitely means something, but you probably won't have heard of it. You might have heard of the first one, but what we've asked our audience to do is to come up with their own definitions, devise their own definitions. And the first one that I suspect some people might have heard of in their childhood is a fern tickle. And so, fern tickle, the first suggestion that we have here is from Michelle Hunter from, is it Carrickfergus?
It
How do you
is.
pronounce it? Carrickfergus. A fern tickle is an intimate romp in the forest.
I like
That is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Peter from Kensal Green says it's an inappropriate but exciting interaction with a daytime TV presenter called Fern. These are brilliant. This is Eddie, also from Carrickfergus. The feeling on your posterior from vegetation when relieving yourself al fresco. Oh, my goodness, these are all brilliant. OK, so you're marking judging, aren't you?
I'm gauging the audience reaction, and the prize will go to the most sustained audience reaction.
OK, so do you need a reminder, or you're OK with this?
I've got
All
them,
right.
they're gems.
So the real definition of a fern tickle, I love this, is a freckle.
That's lovely.
And the definition that's given in the dictionary is that a freckle on the skin resembling the seed of a fern, because it's just so tiny. Freckle itself was a legacy of the Vikings, actually. They gave us the word freckle from Old Norse. But anyway, that's a fern tickle, which I love. So thank you for those definitions. They were brilliant. Right, the second one, Gyles, was a bodkin.
Bodkin. Well, I'm familiar with the word because of Hamlet's great soliloquy.
Yeah, so you know what this one
bodkin.
is.
Yep.
So Gwyn from London suggests alternatively that it's an affectionate term for a six-pack.
Oh, that's rather
A bodkin.
Nice. Oh, I like the look of his bodkin.
Now, I don't know the reference for this one, but I suspect others will. Duncan from Biggin Hill says it's a member of the 1970s TV character Bod's family, Bod's kin.
Well,
Who
that's
was
quite
Bod?
clever.
Who was Bod?
Well, he was a character in the 1970s.
I don't remember Bod.
Bod's family.
Do you remember Bod? OK, I don't remember Bod.
They're older than you, clearly.
Well,
I don't remember Bod. What was the series called? Oh, Bod. Was it a children's series? It was a children's series.
OK.
With a little character that walked around like that.
Bodkin. OK, well, I like that. And finally, Stephen from Hampton Court says that bodkin is a napkin for covering your bod at a naturist resort.
Oh, that's lovely. Actually,
lovely
equipped with
too.
it, you won't suffer from fern tickle, will you?
No, you won't. So you can tell me what it is then, Gyles.
It's a small dagger.
Yeah.
And you stab someone with it.
Exactly. Chaucer was the first to use it in the Reeve's Tale. Bodkin. And also, did you know about baldric? You know brilliant baldric from Blackadder?
I do.
Do you know what a baldric is?
Remind me?
It's a sash that you kind of wear across your shoulder down here, but it contains a weapon. So that is your baldric. So that was taken from the OED. OK, so the third word, thank you very much to everyone for the bodkin deaths, kickshaw. A kickshaw. So Stephen from Barnes says this is an Edwardian theatre critic.
Oh, this is very clever.
A kickshaw.
You see? George Bernard Shaw began writing his plays in Victorian times.
Somebody liked to kick him.
And he was, exactly. So if you had a kickshaw, you didn't like his plays.
That's very clever.
Very clever.
Ian from Sutton says a kickshaw is a Chinese cart with a flat battery. That's good too.
Isn't that good?
Yes.
Instead of a rickshaw, a kickshaw.
Andrew from Oxford says that a kickshaw... Oh, Andrew, do you know about Arbequina? No, OK. Andrew from Oxford says that a kickshaw is a German penalty takers. Kickshaw. Kickshaw, because they're very good. essentially. They're kickshaw.
Oh, very
Yeah, it took
good,
me a
yeah.
while, but I love that one. Fantastic. Okay, so the real definition is quite interesting because we were just talking earlier in our correspondence section with shampoo of how we struggle with foreign words, can't quite get our tongue around them, so we opt for the closest equivalent. Kickshaw was a really bad pronunciation of quelque chose in French, believe it or not. And it was used quite contemptuously for a really elaborate meal that looks kind of French and sophisticated, but is ultimately really disappointing.
Quelque
Isn't that good?
chose.
Yeah,
Kickshaw.
quelque chose. Kickshaw.
Language is totally gripping.
Yeah.
But of all those definitions, the one that got the warmest laugh, they were all much appreciated by us and by all of us, the prize, which is going to be, I think, a Something Rhymes with Purple T-shirt.
T-shirt.
Yay! It's going to Eddie from Carrickfergus.
Yeah. So, Eddie, can I just remind you, said that a fern tickle was the feeling on your bum from vegetation when relieving yourself al fresco.
Brilliant.
Very, very good.
Brilliant. I've got a poem for Eddie because we always end with a poem, but because we've run out of time, this is going to be a very short poem. Eddie, don't worry if your job is small and your rewards are few. Remember that the mighty oak was once a nut like you. That's our lot from this live episode of Something Rhymes with Purple. We continue with our monthly sessions here at the Fortune Theatre. Check our websites, check us online, look for us, and you'll find out how you can book tickets at the Fortune Theatre in Covent Garden. We're
Yes.
here in December.
18th of December, guess what we're talking about?
What?
Underwear.
Underwear. Or underpinnings.
Undergarments.
Inexpressibles.
Yeah,
All those wonderful
inexpressibles.
words
There
the
were your
Victorians
trousers, babe.
had. Or
Absolutely.
will you wear some amusing drawers? Because
won't know about them
do
if
come
I
to
do.
live shows, and there were some people I know. There's a lady here who's been the last three.
3 times, yeah.
3 times.
With
Thank
her
you
come
so much for coming.
And actually, lots of people have come
You come
several
again and
times,
again,
so thank
hoping
you.
one time we'll get it right. And we will. So, should we do the closing credits now?
We shall.
Yes, you can do this bit.
If you did love the show, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we would love it if you would recommend us to your friends too. On social media, we are on @SomethingRhymes on Twitter and Facebook, or @SomethingRhymesWith on Instagram. And as you said, Gyles, the email to get in touch about anything just is purple@somethingelse.com.
That's it. That's it. Is there more to say?
Something Rhymes with Purple is a Something Else and Sony Music Entertainment production produced by Harriet Wells, who's here today with us, alongside Sam Hodges, who's there in the wings, Andrew Quick from Tilted for the live shows, and additional production from Chris Skinner, Jen Mystery, Teddy Riley, and Visibility Poor.
Golly.
Golly.